So if you're looking to level up your copywriting skills in record time, I think this is a video that's going to be interesting to check out. In this conversation that you and I had, Alfred, I had walked you through sort of my discovery on what I think is the next evolution of sharpening your copywriting skills that goes beyond the traditional advice of copy and copy by hand, which you can still do, but goes beyond that. It's additive to that, and also goes beyond just reading books. I think this next thing is kind of interesting and really fun to do now that we have the help of AI.
Yeah, and so I'm not a copywriter myself, but I, do have to write copy every now and then, and it was really interesting to see this process, go through it myself or and together with you, and yeah, I really see how it's really valuable and how if I were to do this, it would really help level up my own copywriting skills. And so we're doing this because we're building ecom brands and we're diving into all these new AI tools that can help us do more for less.
Yeah, made a discovery.
Yeah. Okay. What's up?
So I think I found a new way to study copywriting that is different from what most people talk about when it comes to learning copywriting. I think there's like two things that are really obvious when it comes to learning copywriting. I think one of them is studying books, like persuasion books, copywriting books. That's like a very obvious thing to do. It's like how do you do copywriting? And the second thing that's a little bit more underground, it's like once you get past that like initial Google search of like what are the best books, the videos and all that, then like the more underground thing is okay, study copy by hand. Like just copy it out long form, like using pen and paper and just like copy it out. And like I've done a ton of that.
Yeah. I haven't really studied much copywriting myself, and so if I wanted to get into it, do you have any quick suggestions on some of those old tools that like copying out or books that you liked?
I'd say when it comes to books that I've liked, and this comes from like my very first copywriting mentor, who I hired, and he was big on actually not going through like copywriting books. He was actually big on just psychology and persuasion books. So there's two books that come to mind that I really like went back to over and over again over the years, but also when I first um, got really interested and motivated to study copywriting, those were the books that I like repeatedly went back and forth on, like for a very strong period of time. And then over the years, I keep going back. There's one called One Sentence Persuasion by Blair Warren. And I'm forgetting what his background is. I think it might be in Hollywood or something like that. And then there's another one that also written by Blair Warren. And again, this is very underground in that like Blair is not a copywriter. He's not someone that's quoted by copywriters much, other than my first mentor. And what I really like about his stuff is that it's like it's simply explained, but it's something that as you revisit it more and more, you start to see it everywhere. So the first one, One Sentence Persuasion, and the second one is I'm gonna have to Google it actually. The Forbidden Keys to Persuasion. Say those two were like surprisingly really good books for me. And again, really good is contextual because like the application of books like that are like psychology based, copywriting based, and so forth. I've seen mixed reviews on it in that like some people will like apply everything that the books say, and they'll test it in their day and be like, okay, that didn't work for me, but I did my own thing and then it worked. And then others like follow them like Bibles. But yeah, those are my two favorite books that I can remember off the top of my head. And there's plenty more. There's way more like very traditional copywriting books like scientific advertising, breakthrough advertising, and so forth. But the ones that stuck out to me were those two because they were really easy reads, and they were sort of like there's sometimes a phrase that I've heard where it's like sometimes it's better to read one book 7 times than read like 7 different books one time.
Yeah.
And those two books were sort of the books that I would keep going back to over and over and over again. And then as far as like advertisements that, you could study by hand and copy by hand, I think on swiped.co, there's a lot of examples of older ads from like the 1900s that, you know, you can model. And also, I used to like Google around for like old direct response ads that you can copy by hand. And like, there's a lot of blogs out there that'll just have them as either PDFs or JPEGs. But beyond that, as far as like copying by hand, which I've done, I've filled notebooks with them. My next evolution before this most recent one was actually listening to copy. So what I would do is either get copywriting that's been written, transcribed, and then listen to that, kind of like how, I think you and I both have an affinity towards audiobooks more so than like reading books. And I know there's benefit to both. But like if I'm out on a walk, why not? Right? Or if I'm driving, why not? So a big thing for me was listening to copy or like downloading video sales letters that were seemingly doing well and turning those into MP3s. And then even back in the day before, auxiliary cables were really well accessible, like I just actually put them onto CDs and just throw them in the car and listen to them on drives and stuff. So that's been like my most recent favorite.
Okay.
Before this.
Okay. Yeah. And so before we get to the new one, just like, I don't know, just out of curiosity about, say, the classics or the traditional methods, it seems, from the outside looking in, having a little bit of exposure to copywriters and, but not having really studied it intensely myself, it seems like the people that get the recommendations always seem to be like these classics or traditionals. And I don't know if there's anything that's more modern, or does everyone typically just point back to some of these classics?
I think from what I've seen, and I haven't seen every single, I haven't seen everything that's out there, but most of what I see when it comes to copywriters that are sort of in the sphere that I'm following, a lot of them do go back to the greats, but then their next step is a recommendation on, hey, just study like current quote unquote controls, like study currently what's actually working in the market or that you can get access to or you can see publicly. It's like just study it and dissect it and understand it, which actually leads very organically to, the most recent discovery, which is when you break down copy on your own, it's like you get the opinion of what you're seeing. It's like I know back in the day, probably 10 years ago, like I would take copy that I would see from, modern day sales pages. Like, for example, Ramit Sethi, he runs a business called I Will Teach You to Be Rich. And he's got a bunch of like long form sales pages that he uses to sell his info products. And I would just dissect everything like word by word, line by line, and like put things in the margins and all that. And that's really cool. But the most recent version of that I found is using ChatGPT and like putting in that copy and then asking it sort of similar questions that I'd ask myself so that I can look at my own analyses and then I can look at ChatGPT's analyses. And from there, I can actually sort of like follow that path on like really dissecting it to a granular level to understand the copy a little more, understand why I might think it's working. Because obviously without the data and even with the data, I think our best guesses for why something is working is not always the exact reason why it is, but it's a close approximation, or at least it's our best approximation. And I think doing that exercise over and over and over again is what can help you get better and better. And so that's the exciting thing is like using ChatGPT. I could easily overlook this very simple tactic, but I could see it being really impactful in that you're kind of getting outside perspective, right? In an instantaneous way without necessarily having to have that copy buddy with you all the time. Like you and me, we can study copy together. But if I want to do it at 3 a.m. and you want to do it at 3 p.m., it's like sometimes I just want to get going on it, right? And so it's kind of cool to have that. And also the information that ChatGPT has access to.
ChatGPT with its huge database, would you consider it something like a copy expert, or is it just like a different perspective, and that's it?
Yeah, probably both. Because there's that prompt where you can say, hey, take on the role of XYZ
Mm-hmm.
and then do ABC. So I think you can do that. And I think to me, it's not so much that you can rely on it to be the absolute best and most highly regarded expert. I think for me that helps that you can rely on it to be, or you can presume that it can be a pretty good copywriter. But I think the value is in seeing ideas that you wouldn't have thought of otherwise. I think that's where I see the value. It's like realizing there were unknown unknowns in your analyses that can just help you shift your perspective so that you can start ultimately being a better thinker when it comes to your copywriting, your vocabulary, how you strategically organize your language for persuasion.
Got it. Okay, that's cool.
Yeah. So I think a cool thing for us to do, we can sort of do a little walkthrough of what that really looks like tactically. Like when we're actually inside ChatGPT and we got a piece of copy that we presume is good, or if we know it's good, like if it's from our own data and we know that it's hitting our KPIs, then we can study it a little more so we can get some outside perspective. So something we can do is maybe navigate to a brand that we're familiar with, grab some of their copy, and then throw it in ChatGPT and do this whole process with.
All right, let's take a look. I can turn on screen share. What should I do first?
Yeah, so for an example, we can pull up Facebook Ads Library and just take a look at some landing pages from brands that we know / presume are doing well. One that we've been following is Earth Breeze. They sell eco-friendly sheets. They're getting a decent amount of traffic every month, according to SimilarWeb. When you check out their website using the Chrome extension, and so
Right.
just because I'm familiar with their brand, I know that on their main page, Earth Breeze here, a lot of the ads that they're running here are more e-commerce driven in that they're not really direct response. They're not long form pages. So instead of studying this page, what we can do is study their secondary page where they
Okay.
drive their traffic to their advertorials. So if you do a search in the top corner or the top bar rather, for The Breeze, which is their secondary page, we can find their advertorials. So keep scrolling down. Yep.
This one right here?
Yep. Same branding as Earth Breeze. All right, cool. And so the only reason why I know this is because I've been studying them for a while and really like they're doing strategically and tactically as well. So we can take a look at one of their ads here that leads to a long form advertorial, and then we can study that. I think the nuances here is that just because an ad is here doesn't mean that the ad or the landing page is necessarily doing well. We're making that presumption here, but there are other tools you can use to spy on other brands, spy on your competition, to make some assumptions on, what ads are doing well. So, for example, I'll use tools that can show what they estimate as the impression count for their ads, and obviously, the more impressions, the more you assume that they're spending more money on it because you're assuming it's working well. But for our context, we can just use this to pull out some copy that we can use to study and use ChatGPT as a study buddy to get better at thinking about copy with.
Got it. Okay. So should I just go to one of these pages?
Yeah.
All right. Let's, how about this turtle here?
Yep. Cool. So there's two ways to get this into ChatGPT. One way, especially if you're on 3.5 and not paying for GPT Plus, ChatGPT Plus, is you can just copy and paste all the copy over here and throw it into ChatGPT.
Right.
If you are on Plus, something that we've tested is you can just grab the link from the URL bar and actually use the browsing extension to say, hey, read this article, and then after that, you've confirmed that it can read it, then you can start asking it a bunch of questions. And so something that could be kind of cool is if you've got a big enough screen, you can have like on the left side the advertorial or the piece of copy that you want to study, and on the right side you can have ChatGPT open, and you can start asking it questions. And studying it and dissecting it in a way that improves your thinking about the copy. Because I think one of the things that's interesting about this is copywriting now, because of ChatGPT and Jasper and other tools, um, can be done for you. But I think the skill of still being a good copywriter to, you know what triggers to push and like know how to structure things and know how to like come up with ideas that are supported by copy. Um, that is still, I think, a very human thing, and that's augmented by these tools rather than completely replaced.
Got it. Okay. So I can take the URL, throw it into ChatGPT.
Yeah.
But what are we looking at here? It looks like some sort of uh, article or advertorial or something like that.
Yeah. So it's an advertorial. What happens on this page is people go from the ad to the advertorial page. It sort of pre-sells them and warms them up to the product. And then if they click on check availability, which is the call to action on this page, it goes to their product
Right.
description pages for people to actually go and buy. So it's a way of sort of warming people up before going for the sale, so that you have a better chance of increasing your conversion rates because you're educating them a little more. And also, in some ways, they're meeting people where they're at first, because while they're browsing through Instagram or Facebook, um, they might not be interested necessarily in eco-friendly sheets, but they may be interested in the hook that got them in. So, for example, in this one, it was a turtle that said, I think, please stop using detergent or something like that. So, like, those who are conscious about the environment may resonate with that and then care about the sheets afterwards because you met them where they were at first. So that's what I think is really, that's what I really like and admire about their strategic, thinking about how they go about using these advertorials to drive e-commerce sales.
Got it. Okay. So I have the link copied. What should I say here? Maybe I should start with just asking to summarize or something like this.
Yeah, summarize this page and then just throw in the link. That way we can sort of get two things. One is we can see their summary, which is helpful in some ways. But the second thing is to just confirm that it can read it and it's not like going off into some other URL or it's not broken. Otherwise, we'll have to do the copy and paste maneuver.
All right. Maybe we'll just skip ahead to when this is all loaded up. All right. So it's done creating the response based on that prompt. Looks like it's doing a pretty good summary of the page. Andrew, you're probably pretty familiar with what's on here. What do you think?
Yeah, I think it's a summary, but I don't think it's necessarily, an analysis of why we think it's working from like a persuasive level and like a conversion level. But it is showing that it can read it, um, and what's going on. It's like here's what's here, but here's not necessarily why it's working well.
Yeah, and I guess that's just a function of what we actually asked it to do, which in this case is
Yeah,
just to summarize. So far, so good.
yeah, it's good. It's like green light for the fact that it can see it, and I love the fact that it saved us all that copy and pasting time. It's
Yeah.
just so much simpler this way. So one of the things that we can do is start asking it prompts. And I think what's interesting is that prompts are useful, but I don't think they're the full story. Is like just because you have the great prompts. I think the more exciting thing is that you can keep thinking of more prompts that are limitless, really, especially in this exercise where it's really, I think, an individual thing because you're going to have your own set of background expertise, background history, background experience with what you've seen as good marketing or your own copywriting background or your own way of analyzing things psychologically. So I think that's really interesting where whatever it spits back to you, you can sort of use that as a further jumping off point for further analyzing and dissecting why you think something's working or why it's not.
Hmm.
Um, to then, again, continuously improve your understanding of coming with better ideas that can be supported by copywriting and AI generated copy.
Okay,
Um,
so let's say me as a non-copywriting expert, I'm trying to learn how to write better copy. I have this article. What should we put in here?
Yeah. I think you can start. So there's broad things that you can ask, and then there's also specific things. What I think could be interesting is like really broadly, you could just ask something like, you know, this advertorial is performing well on Facebook with Facebook traffic. Why do you think that is? Give me 5 reasons. Right. That's an example of something that you could ask. Beyond that, just as you're typing that, beyond that, I think your standard questions that are interesting to ask every single time, because these are things that I think are where 80/20, the 80/20 rule is when it comes to pages like this converting. But let's just see what it has here first. Right. So what I think is interesting about what it's giving back to us is it's giving us some direction on how we can think about this page. Strong narrative and emotional appeal, clear solution to a problem, social proof. If you're coming in with a light background on copywriting, I think it's giving you some nice vocabulary when it comes to marketing terminology that could be helpful to understand so that you can become more familiar with it. On the other hand, if this is nothing new to you, I think what's interesting is it can be a reminder of what's being used, because sometimes it's hard to catch every single thing that's happening, like the social proof or the charitable aspect or the risk-free trial. Sometimes it can be right in front of you, but you forget that that's even a tactic, because you know so many tactical things and you know so many different types of copy strategies that like some of them just become so obvious that you miss them in your analyses.
Yeah.
So I think that's one way to go about it, is like just really broadly speaking, hey, what's working well. Some other things I consider is stuff like asking these are 3 questions that I like. What copywriting frameworks are being used here? That's one example.
Okay.
Another
Should we just start with that one?
What's that?
Should we just start with this one?
Sure.
Or do you want to ask all of them all at the same time?
No, we can do one at a time.
Okay.
This is one that I like because I like thinking in things of modules and structures. It's repeatable. So let's just see what it has to say when it comes to what copywriting frameworks are being used. Right, problem, agitate, solution. So that's pretty like common when you read a lot of those classic copywriting books that are often quoted. Ada as well. That's a very common structure and flow. Yep. Features, advantages, benefits. That's especially common when you start talking about like the bullets section of product description pages and sales pages and advertorials. And storytelling. So this sort of gives you an idea of what's happening on a very high level. The next question I would ask is, the thread that runs through this advertorial that makes it a good piece of advertising. And the question I like is, what is the big idea that's in this piece of copy? Because that's something that I ask myself a lot. So like if I'm reading through here, to me, my assessment before even seeing ChatGPT's assessment is like using sort of, can you scroll up to the very top actually of the advertorial? Yeah. So at the very, very top where the headline is, usually like the first, the headline and the first little bit of any piece of advertising, that's usually where the big idea is tucked away in, at least in the way that I see it. And so the big idea here for me, if I was sort of writing in the margins of this page and taking notes on it, is the fact that laundry detergent, there's an alternative laundry detergent that can be used than what we're used to seeing. It's like, hey, here's something new that you can try that you may not have heard of before, and it actually doesn't even require any liquid. Like most of us probably use detergents that are liquid, but now here's one that isn't liquid and isn't in a plastic jug And so you've got to hear about this.
Mm-hmm.
Now, looking at ChatGPT's assessment, just as we were discussing that in real time, I'll just read it out. The big idea in this piece of copy is that traditional laundry detergents, particularly those packaged in plastic jugs, are significantly harmful to the environment, our health, and contribute to unethical practices like animal testing. The solution to this multifaceted problem is Earthbreeze's innovative product, eco-friendly liquidless detergent sheets that are delivered straight to your door in sustainable biodegradable packaging. These sheets are presented as a revolutionary way to do laundry that's not only effective in cleaning, but also kind to the environment, animals, and our skin. This shift to a more sustainable alternative is portrayed as a necessary and urgent action to mitigate the environmental damage caused by traditional laundry detergents. Yeah, I'd say it's pretty accurate in terms of, the idea that's being conveyed here. And I think one of the things that ChatGPT will kind of miss here, and maybe there's a way to prompt it, but I like the visuals that were used on this advertorial.
Mm.
I like that they use a turtle here, about to chomp on a piece of plastic. And so a lot of what's being said here is sort of supportive of this big idea. And every sort of good piece of advertising has a big idea, like the 4-hour work week, intermittent fasting. Like there's just the ketogenic diet, the carnivore diet. There's like this underlying thing that is new and revolutionary and different and something you haven't heard before, that is worth paying attention to. And I think ChatGPT did a decent job of summarizing what the idea is here to again assist and augment in my analyses of why I think this is working.
What's the third question that you like to ask?
The third one is what's the hook being used in this piece of copy? And so the hook is sort of, there's different ways to think about it and define it, but for the simplicity of how we're using it here, I would say it's the thing that grabs most attention, the thing that actually gets you to want to pay attention to reading the rest of this advertorial. So let's see what it has to say. The hook in this piece of copy is a revelation that even when consumers recycle their laundry detergent jugs, they often still end up in oceans, landfills, contributing to environmental pollution. That's a pretty good hook in that, like, what you thought was actually being good for the environment is actually not. Like, surprisingly, it's not. The surprise coupled with the assertion that we've all been misled by plastic companies about the effectiveness of recycling is designed to capture readers' attention and draw them into the rest of the content. It challenges a common belief about recycling and creates a sense of intrigue, promoting readers to want to learn more about the issue and the proposed solution. I like that. I really like the way ChatGPT put it here, because I think this might have been one that if I'm not really paying attention, I might miss. Like if I'm trying to learn copywriting, or if I'm refining my copy skills, I might be so obsessed with like what words are being used that I might actually be missing this hook. That like, hey, they're actually being very strategic in how they're positioning this idea of like, hey, what you think is actually happening with your recyclables isn't actually happening. Mm-hmm. And so that's why you need this alternative. Like I might be so focused on just like the micro of the words that they're choosing, and the micro of what they're using in like their headline, like, the way that they phrase their headline and all that, that I would miss this. That I love that ChatGPT can help me and assist me with seeing these things that I might forget sometimes or might overlook.
Got it. Yeah. It seems like in this case, this is point number one here. So would you consider this the hook here?
Yeah, I'd say so. I'd say it's a combination. The way I define, and a lot of people define hooks in different ways. So I don't think there's any one specific way to define it. But I would say the headline in combination with probably this first paragraph is what I would define as making up most of the hook. But then it's also something that like recurs throughout the advertorial as well. It's like it's sort of a theme and a thread that runs through the entire thing. It's like the reason why you want to pay attention to it is based off that first thing. It's like, now that I got you in because you realize the truth about what's happening with these plastics. Here's like additional reasons why you got to keep paying attention.
Okay, cool. So we have a little bit more insight into this copy. Um, I think I understand it a little bit better. There's some concepts here. Uh, there's some principles here. Maybe what would we do next? Like, say for example, it's like, okay, I we want to learn more about ADA, for example. So the advertorial first captures the reader's attention with strong headlines and starting facts. Like, this is all kind of general right now,
Yep.
and it's some of it is it's kind of good to know that they're using it, but maybe I'm not quite seeing the link just yet. So like, how do I like dig into this a little bit more and maybe try to understand what specifically they're doing with these frameworks?
So I think what we can try is just prompting it with show me how ADA or the copywriting framework ADA was used in this advertorial.
So we can skip ahead to when this is completed. Okay, so it looks like it's done. How does it look so far?
I think it's pretty good, and I think in some ways there's a degree of subjectivity on like how much you agree or disagree with what it's spitting back. But to me, on a glance, I quite like what it's saying. I think it's pretty accurate. I do think the way that it matched um, the different sections of the advertorial with the different sections of ADA is pretty accurate. It's pretty good. Um, so if I was new to the concept of what ADA was, I actually think this is a pretty good explanation
Hmm.
that would augment my own sort of presumptions of how I would apply. Okay, where is the attention here? How is attention being used, or how is the attention section rather being executed in this advertorial? How is the intersection? How's the desire section? I think it's done a pretty good job of it.
Nice. Okay. So, yeah, I think this helps because um, the words on their own, I know that I would come up with my own meaning on what that means. But to call out the specific parts of the copy that is actually intended to use that framework, I think is really helpful, right? Because you can kind of cut through all the copy here and just hone in on just the parts that are relevant to this framework, because I'm assuming there's multiple frameworks at play here.
Yeah.
So yeah, it kind of acts as a filter and just kind of like simplifies the whole advertorial down for me here. So like, yeah, okay, the headline and the way and what they're saying, that's helpful to grab the attention, and so on and so forth.
Yeah. I think it's really interesting too is like sometimes we can forget. But I mean, if you've been writing copy for a while, I think you almost think in these like sections and chunks.
Hmm.
But like when you're first getting started, or if it's been a while, it can almost be like when you watch a movie, you don't realize there's like three acts,
Hmm.
or like there's a beginning, middle, and
Yeah.
end, or like there's frameworks in Hollywood, right, that are always repeated. Joseph Campbell's hero's journey, that sort of thing.
Hmm.
But you can start to see that here. And I think what's cool about ChatGPT is like if you're just getting into copywriting, you can take all these landing pages that you find and collect in your own sort of second brain. You can run it through ChatGPT and help you understand and see these sections a little more until you get really familiar with um, what examples of this applications of this structure looks like.
Got it. Okay, what else could we do?
I'd be curious to know if any questions come up for you. Is like just as you skim through the advertorial? Are there certain questions that come up for you around like that you're either asking yourself as far as like why you think this is working and like how you'd phrase that to yourself? You can also phrase to ChatGPT.
Yeah, I think maybe because I'm not so deep into copywriting. So the main question that I have in my head is a really general one, and I think it probably requires a little bit more nuanced questions to get there. But that question is essentially it's like how do I use what I'm seeing here to create great copy for my own applications, right? And so I get that kind of understanding what's going on here is a part of that, but I'm not quite sure how I take this and become a better copywriter myself.
Yeah, I think part of it is it's kind of like going to school, right? Like
Yeah.
ChatGPT is almost like your study buddy or in some ways a professor, right? It's like
Mhm.
if before previously to seeing ChatGPT say, "Hey, here are the three frameworks that were being used. Like there's Ada, there's problem, agitate, solve, and so forth." It's like if you didn't know that those structures existed before, you might not even bother to think about, "Hey, I should structure my copy in this way." So I think the next time you go to write some copy, maybe you can say, "Hey," and it could be with ChatGPT as well. You can say, "Hey, my product does X, Y, Z. The big angle that I'm using or the big idea that I'm using is ABC. Please write an advertorial for me using the ADA structure as an example." So I think it becomes how resourceful and creative you can be with what you're learning from ChatGPT and also even learning from yourself in your own analyses of the copy. The other thing that I think is really interesting about using ChatGPT to study copy is you can take copy that either again is doing well or you're presuming is doing well and just ask it to make it do it better, like do a better job and just see
Mm.
what it does
Yeah.
as like feedback of like, oh, I didn't even think about writing it in this way. So I think that would be maybe interesting to see if ChatGPT can do that here in real time. Is like, ask it, what are five things that can be done to improve this copy? And then from there, after it gives us the recommendations, we can tell it to actually rewrite it for us and then see what it spits out and be like, oh, do we like that more? Do we not? I think that'd be interesting to see.
So we can kind of let this go and we can skip over to when it's done.
Cool. So it gave us five. And I think what's really interesting is we don't, like, I chose five sort of arbitrarily. We could say 10, we could say 20.
Hmm.
Um, and so we could ask it for a lot more upgrades than what it gave. And just the upgrades it gave, I think, are really interesting. I think that, again, depending on how sharp you are on a given day, you might not notice all these things that could actually be done to the piece of copy, especially if it was your own. But I like what it's saying, substantiating the claims a little more, um, having customer testimonials, and some of these things might actually just be that ChatGPT couldn't see it. So, for example, with the visuals,
Yeah.
I don't think it's picking up on the visuals, even though there are some visuals in the editorial.
Yeah. I was thinking the same thing.
Yeah, but yeah, I mean, it's not doing a bad job. Again, it's giving us some directional places to go when it comes to our daily, weekly, monthly exercise of trying to become a better strategist of copy. Um, so what we can do just as an experiment here is we can say, okay, rewrite the advertorial using the suggestions you just recommended, and then we can see if it'll do that.
All right. So we'll let this do its thing and we can skip ahead to when it's done again.
Cool. So yeah, it's done. And we can take a quick look. I'll read the first little bit just to see directionally how it's done. So here's a revised advertorial. Are you ready to revolutionize your laundry routine? Meet EarthBreeze, the eco-friendly laundry solution that's shaking up the detergent industry. Why are detergent companies selling you bulky, wasteful products that are up to 90% water and packaged in non-recyclable plastic jugs? Profits. They're more interested in shelf space and eye-catching jugs than environmental impact, but we're here to change the game. So they're doing a very different style. I think they're going for sort of the pitch a little bit more directly than Earthbreeze was. Um,
Mm-hmm.
they're less, I guess, warming up and then going for the kill than just going for the kill. Um, and that's fine. I just think that it's probably I like Earthbreeze's style better. It's what I've been trained in a lot more.
Yeah.
So I think what I would say, from what ChatGPT did here was it gave us a variation to have feedback on. Is like maybe there's chunks of copy here that I might actually like and adapt into the original that I had. If it was my copy or if it was copy that we were trying to run for ourselves. But for studying someone else's copy like we are doing here, I think it just gives us further ideas for just things that we wouldn't have stumbled across either way, otherwise rather. And to me, my assessment of this is that I actually think the Earth-based copy is better than ChatGPT's. Like I think they do a better job of warming people up for the sale than ChatGPT is doing here. But everything's up for testing.
Yeah. Would you consider the copy here sounding kind of generic, or maybe not
I'd say
generic,
so.
but like the style is generic, right?
Yeah,
It's
yeah. I'd
there's
say it's lacking the personality that I think the Earthbreeze page has a little more of.
yeah,
Um, yeah,
and I think the other thing is it's sort of cliche and as well. So with Silicon Valley, the show, they have this joke that they always make, where every company is trying to revolutionize or change the world, and
yeah,
that's kind of what they're saying here. And what I think Earthbreeze does a good job here is they're just presenting the problem, and they're like, oh, well, we have one here. Whereas here, it's kind of like just saying like, hey, we're so great, we're revolutionizing the industry, we're here to change the game. We're shaking up the detergent industry. It's like you're making the claim, you're sort of claiming it for yourself instead of kind of letting other people come to the conclusion based on what you're doing. And so, I guess again, I don't know. I'm no copy expert, but this almost kind of turns me off a little bit when I read this, and I think that's
right.
it's the self labeling that I think I don't like.
Yeah, that's why I sort of like that ChatGPT can give you direction on like,
Mm-hmm.
hey, here are things that could make the copy better.
Yeah,
Because that's sort of what we prompted it for earlier. But then when it actually does the rewriting of it for you, it may or may not turn out the way you want. But again,
yeah,
what I like about it is it gives you some ideas. Again, if this process is made for studying copy, again, even the copy that gives you can
yeah.
get a chance to like give it
To
feedback or
study it.
like even
Yeah,
ask it to give itself feedback.
yeah, and I think that's one of the cool things about ChatGPT is like, okay, it gives you this, and we read this, and maybe I'm not a copy expert, but I can kind of intuitively feel that I don't like it, and so
Right.
I could probably just prompt it something different and say like, "Hey, I didn't like this part of it. Can you do it again?"
Yeah.
And we can easily get something different.
Yeah. Yeah. So one of the other things that we didn't talk about here that is a trick that a lot of people do, and I think the reliability of it is up for debate, but I still find it interesting to do because there's like no downside to it. It costs you basically nothing additionally, right? But one of the things that you could do before maybe your first prompt, when you say, "Hey, like, show me, the structures that were being used in this piece of copy," or "Why do you think this is good?" So you can tell it to take on the role of a marketer or a copywriter that you want to take on the role of. Like, take on the role of Gary Halbert, take on the role of Dan Kennedy, take on the role of Eugene Schwartz. You can take on the role of some sort of marketer that you want and then put in your prompt. That's like
Mm-hmm.
something additional you can do. I've done that before and I haven't seen huge changes in the way that the outputs came for me. But paired with that, adding those extra words wasn't a whole bunch of work. So like I don't see a huge downside to it. And I think if we want to go a step further in actually making that real, what we might want to do is create our own bot based off of that person, like transcripts of their interviews or
Right.
transcripts of their books and
Right.
stuff. But that's for a separate topic. But yeah, that's the new way to study copy that I think is probably better than the way that I was doing it when it comes to just listening to copy. I think that's a nice way to become familiar with it. But I think this way you're engaging with it a little more. Like you're asking more questions, which is essentially the process of thinking. So then you can ask questions, get the answers from both ChatGPT and yourself, and just continuously dissect and analyze so that you build that unconscious competence further and further. Whether you're like new to copy or whether you're continuing to refine your copy skills like I am.
Awesome. Yeah, I think that's really helpful. Definitely going to give that a try.
Cool. Thanks for watching to the end of this video. Please like and subscribe to help us out.
If you want help with implementing AI tools into your business, leave a comment with "the prompted" below and we'll reach out.